So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce to you the director of the Living Dead trilogy, George A. Romero.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and we'll open it up to you guys.
First, I can't believe people still show up to see this movie. Anyway, we'll talk about this later, but all I see are the mistakes that I made.
No, I mean, that's the thing. Is like the film came out, you made in 1968, and it kind of went out on the drive-in circuit. It just kind of creeped out there. It didn't really get recognized right away. Can you talk about the journey of that?
Well, you know, the fact is that when the film was first released, it made money. It cost us about $117,000, and it made about $700,000 in the first year, in those drive-ins and neighborhood theaters, and blah blah blah. And we said, "Wow, this is an easy business." Then it went away. I mean, just disappeared. And then one day, somebody discovered that there was no copyright on the film, because we had our original title was Night of the Flesh Eaters. And we stupidly, as young filmmakers, put the copyright bug, the little C with the circle around it, on the title card. And when they changed the title, that bug came off. And all of a sudden there was no copyright. They didn't notice, we didn't notice, nobody noticed, It was one of those things that just the one that got away. And all of a sudden there was no copyright on the film. So, the moment that people realized that, everybody was selling it on VHS, and, everybody could release it without having to pay any royalties or anything else. And that's really the journey of that film. Then all of a sudden, the French discovered it. A magazine called Cahiers du Cinéma, which you may know, wrote this huge article about it being amazing, important American cinema. And I wasn't thinking of it as that at all. But everyone who was sort of noticing the film was talking about the racial issue. And to us, it wasn't a racial message at all. In fact, when we cast Dwayne Jones, when Dwayne Jones agreed to do it, we didn't change the script. And when Jack and I were writing the script, it was the guy in our mind was Caucasian. And the same things happened to him. And people are saying, well, here come these posse with dogs and going after the black guy. They were going after the guy when he was white. So that was not our point. Our point was more the disintegration of society, the inability to communicate, the disintegration of the family unit. And that's the stuff that we were thinking.
And you just picked him because he was the best actor you could find.
That's it. Dwayne was the best actor from among our friends.
And so, but before the French discovered it, so back in the 60s and the early 70s, horror films were kind of for kids. They had like the Universal Bela Lugosi Dracula and the Boris Karloff Frankenstein, and they'd have like matinees where parents could go drop off their kids. They could see these silly old horror films, but somehow Night of the Living Dead got lumped into this circuit. And so I think Roger Ebert actually wrote a piece about how he went to one of these screenings, and it was like a double bill of one of the kind of tame films and then Night of the Living Dead. And he's like, and the kids were enjoying themselves for the first film, but then as soon as Night of the Living Dead started, they were crying and running, screaming. And there was actually kind of like part of the American kind of mainstream writing, like in Writer's Digest, who just like, this, you should know what your children are watching, and just like ripped into it.
Well, there is, Ebert's article was picked up by the Reader's Digest, and it became a cause célèbre. It was one of the 3 films that were cited when people were arguing that we need to control these guys. We need to control filmmakers. You know, it was one of the films always cited when the people were arguing for an MPAA or for whatever the MPAA became. I guess it still is the MPAA, but
it was the equivalent of kind of like an Oprah Winfrey social scandal.
Yeah,
basically. But then it was really the acceptance, and this is kind of often the case. Once the French say it's okay, everyone jumps on board.
It's okay, man.
Yeah.
I started to watch Jerry Lewis.
So we could just talk about again the making of it, because this was, you had just a very small crew, one color films were predominant, but the film was, you chose to shoot the film in black and white. Was that a budget constraint, or?
It was initially, back in the day when we made this film, cities the size of Pittsburgh, which is where we made it, had film laboratories. 8, 16, 35, complete film labs, processing, work printing, doing the whole thing, because the news was on film. This is before video of any kind, before videotape, and the news was on film. And it's really where I learned to, use the pencil, hanging out with these journeyman editors in one of these labs. And so we were able to actually make the film and complete it. And that was, we were able to actually finish the movie with the title Night of the Flesh Eaters. And then the night that Russ, my partner and I, Russ Streiner and I, were driving it to New York, we had the first answer print of the film in the trunk of our car, and driving to New York, we heard on the radio that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And that, I think, is where the whole race thing came from. Yeah. I mean, that sort of made the film that much more exotic, or that much more...
Just hearing that political news, what you had in the trunk, suddenly it changed.
Yeah, I know. We said, wonder if this is going to be good for us. I mean, you hate to say that, but, it's obviously the thing that occurs to you.
People would read, it was very rare to have, like, a black lead hero. And sometimes with the way it was, America was still segregated to some extent in the South, and some theaters down in the States and in the drive-ins wouldn't book this because of the color of the hero's skin.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And you know what? Even when I made Land of the Dead, which was, 4 or 5 years ago, I don't remember when it was, Universal would not let me. I had this convention. I had used African American leads in all of the Dead movies up until that point, and I wrote the character again as an African American, because I said, well, hey, if I can do this little bit to help, great. And Universal wouldn't let it happen. Even then, even as recently as that, they said, can't do it. And so I said, so as a result, I made the lead zombie an African-American. And, I thought that was sort of my retaliation.
And the interesting thing, again, of like the time period that this was shot in, there's an amazing, really great documentary called American Nightmare that you should try and seek out, because it's just about horror films in the 1970s, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Dawn of the Dead, and it looks at how these filmmakers were making films, but at the same time, they're a reflection of like the cultural and social political time that they were made in. And the beginning of this documentary starts off with intercutting scenes between news footage of Vietnam, the racial strife in the South, and Night of the Living Dead, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you can't tell the difference between news and the horror films. And it's just really remarkable.
Yeah, it takes a minute to recognize which is what's Memorex.
and that's one of the magic things about the film, is that there's a realism to it, and like I said before, horror films were considered to be like, just for kids, for trick-or-treaters.
Yeah, well, to a great extent they were benign then, but it wasn't really. It was like the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. It wasn't so much Dracula and Frankenstein and the early stuff. It was, when we were out, it was, the 50-foot woman and stuff like that. And they were, of course, much more benign. They basically had no message, except that atomic energy might destroy us all. And that was it. And so we were trying to, number one, push the envelope a little bit on the gore, even though today it's nothing. And your question about black and white, originally, I actually argued when we were making the film, because we came to a point about a week into the film, shooting the film, where we had some investment, and we tried to decide, well, we could switch to 16 millimeter and go color and reshoot that week, or stick with 35 and stay with black and white. And I argued at the time that the most brutal scenes that I've ever seen, one of the most gory things is the image of Brando after they beat him up on the waterfront, and he's got blood all over him. And I felt that it was more gruesome, and I think that had something to do with news, because the news was all black and white at that time. There was no color TV yet, and I always felt that the black and white, the blood looked more real. And in color, most of the color blood was John Wayne blood, and not very realistic, a little too bright, a little too red. And I honestly felt that black and white blood looked gorier, and so I decided to stick with black and white.
Because when you look at the blood and gore in Dawn of the Dead, it's cartoonish. And I mean, as gruesome as it is, it's still laughable.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, it's meant to.
Exactly. It's supposed to be.
It's meant to be funny.
Do we have any questions from you guys? Let's see. We have people with microphones here.
Okay.
So
I can't see anybody.
Yeah,
so.
We've got some people. Here we go. We've got someone over here, I think. So they're going to run a mic over.
Hi, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for
This is
having me.
really an exciting moment for us. I'm a grad student at OCAD. I'm interested in knowing about your methodologies, pre and post film, and I guess during the film too. Creative process, what kind of methodologies do you use? Did you have to do interviews? What kind of research did you need to do before this film?
I mean, one of the things is that pretty much throughout your whole history of all your films, you're the writer, with just a few exceptions.
Right.
Can you talk about the process of where you get your inspiration from?
The news, I guess. I often, when I'm sitting there writing something, I will have CNN on, and it does, it's like that's my wallpaper. But I usually get the idea I get some germ of an idea, like for when we made Dawn of the Dead. I resisted for 10 years wanting to do another one, because particularly after the Cahiers du Cinema wrote these glowing things about it, and then it was invited into the Museum of Modern Art, it became an important movie, and I'm sitting there going, wait, I didn't, as I said, all I could see was the mistakes in it, but technical mistakes, and I didn't want to do another one. I socially knew the people that were developing the shopping mall where we shot Dawn, and it was the first shopping mall that we'd ever seen, the first indoor shopping mall that anyone had ever seen in Western Pennsylvania. And I went out a few days before it opened, and I saw all these trucks coming in with everything that Americans could ever want. And I said, wow, this is like a temple to consumerism. And that was the thought, and that's where the thought came from. And then I started to write a script that had that at its core. And I always sort of look for that in in my fantasy fiction, I'm always looking for the core first, and then sort of build around it. That's part of my process. And then going through it, I used to edit my own stuff. In those days, I used to shoot my own stuff, and it's very hard to learn how to collaborate with when you're used to having that absolute hands-on control. It's hard to learn how to collaborate. And you have to have relationships. You have to have really good relationships with people. And now here I have better relationships, I think, than I ever had in the Pittsburgh days. And I'm there all the way through the edit. I'm sort of making sure, I don't know, being the guardian angel, sort of watching over that part of the process all the way to the end. As far as the scripts, the idea always comes first. It has to come from some sort of a germ of an idea. It's like, I know a lot of people, Colin, you were saying the other day that, people come to you with movies that young people with movies that they've made, they're all zombie movies. Something, but it has to have something in its soul, right?
I mean, you have something
like Let the Right One In had something, it had a little something different instead of, the other vampire junk that's around. And so
that's what it is, yeah. I mean, you should see, we actually screened it last night. George did do a vampire film called Martin, which is a very different take on what the vampire is and whether or not he's even a vampire. But that's what you've been special at. You've been always kind of taking a convention and kind of twisting it around.
Turning it around, yeah. Sometimes that's where the idea comes from, to go back to your question. Sometimes it's just a twist on an idea. When I started to do Martin, I wanted to do a comedy. I wanted to do something silly about how a vampire would have to always, be changing his driver's license and, making him look older. Things like that, silly things. And then I said, wait a minute, I could do something a little more creepy with this. And, some point somewhere when I'm in the shower, the idea comes and it pops. And then when I'm actually doing the writing, I basically just sit there and write. I don't get up. I just get up to, eat, sleep, drink, and I'm basically stay there. That's the way I work. When I'm really deeply into something, I don't want to be disturbed.
Do we have any other questions here? At the back? Okay. Okay, stand up so we can see you.
Or wave or something.
There we go, way in the back.
What is your biggest challenge as a director?
My age. No, I'm joking. It's always different, man. It's just always completely different. Sometimes, depending on who's holding the purse strings, sometimes you can't use the people that you want to use. I've had directors of photography forced on me by studios, and that's usually the big challenge. And so I prefer to work in an environment like here in Toronto. Since I've been here, I've been able to sort of, I gravitate towards people that I feel have the same sort of aesthetics, and we wind up becoming friends. I mean, that's the way it was in Pittsburgh all those years. I worked with the same sort of little family of technicians, and now I have a new little group here that I love working with, and it's great. Relationships are the most important thing, and if you've got those good relationships, you can shorthand your message. You say something, and the DP knows exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to repeat yourself or over explain or whatever. I've been in situations where I shot a film called The Dark Half, where the DP was a big deal DP, a guy that worked for Merchant Ivory, Tony Pierce Roberts. And there's a scene, for example, where these people are coming home for the first time. Their house, their country house, has been closed basically for the winter. And they're driving up for the first time to this place. And Tony said, well, wouldn't it look better if there were lights in the windows? And I said, yeah, it would look better, but it doesn't make any sense. And he got his way. He was able to call the studio and insist. And this guy nearly got me fired off this film. And because he had the power. He was looking to win an Oscar, and he had the power. And he won that argument. And so if you look at The Dark Half, when they pull up to the house, the light's on in the house. And I wasn't able to say anything about it. You wind up having to fight and duke it out on every little point. And that's no fun at all.
Yeah, it's a very, what a lot of people don't realize is how fickle the business is, and a film can be made or canceled just on a whim often, and that's happened to you often.
Oh yeah,
and it's happened to so many other people. We have another question. There was a hand. Okay, there's one over here. Yep.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to comment on Creepshow. Oh, over here.
Oh,
over this way.
Other side.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Over this way, George.
Okay. See, I only hear out of one ear, so I have no stereophonic hearing. I can't tell.
I was just wondering, just to get away from the zombie thing for a second, Creepshow was like an anthology. I was just wondering if you're ever going to attempt something like that again, because I thought it was pretty unique and
Well, you know what? I would love to. I think they remade a Creepshow 2. I'm not even sure about that.
There's Creepshow 2 and there's a Creepshow 3.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I don't think Steve had anything to do with it at all. I don't even think Richard did. Richard Rubenstein, my ex-partner, I think it did that. Somehow Warner Brothers sold it off. I don't know how it happened. I'd love to do it. The wisdom in Hollywood is that anthologies don't work. And I don't get that. I mean, one of these days, and there's going to be an anthology that'll blow the roof off again.
There's a good, it's actually playing, I think, in Toronto now, but it'll be coming out on video and VOD. There's a really great horror anthology called VHS. Check it out. It is, and it's directed by around 4 of the top young horror directors and writers, and it's super fun. And it's proof that anthologies do work, but it was an independent film, which was done for next to nothing.
Yeah. I also saw in Lund, we didn't see the film, but there's something of the Dead with many directors.
Oh, the ABCs of Death.
ABCs of Death, yeah.
ABCs of Death, we just had the world premiere here in September at the film festival, and it's 26 short films about death. Each one, it's like a children's book, like A is for, D is for dog, and it's 26 different directors. And some of them are strange, some of them don't work, but like half of them are just incredible. But I mean, that's the thing with an anthology. You're always going to have one which isn't as strong as the other 3, and it's just the way the mix works out. So
definitely. I mean, there's no question. And then trying to decide, when we were trying to decide what order to put the stories in Creepshow, I mean, there was more arguing about that than about anything else on the production. What order should we put them in? Let's get rid of Jordy early, and let's put Leslie Nielsen in the middle somewhere. That's
and here's we've got still over here. Okay, well then we'll get to you.
Hi, I was at the screening last night of Martin, and I had forgotten how special that film was, and it really moved me, and I wanted to thank you for it. First of all, just for making it. It's an amazing film. I'm happy it's out there. But my question is actually about the role of women in the Dead trilogy. I really enjoy the trilogy. I'm a lifelong fan. But if you look at a character from the first film, say Barbara, for example, and then you look at Laurie from Day of the Dead, there's quite a journey there. And I was just wondering if you wanted to comment about that. Like, I think Day of the Dead's almost a feminist film if you think about the other 2 characters, the Rhodes character and the scientist character. They're kind of caricatures of masculinity. So I just wonder if you wanted to comment on that.
Well, it's interesting because someone mentioned this the other night when I was doing the first talk with Colin. When I made Night of the Living Dead, I was as unaware of Barbara's problems as a woman as I was about Dwayne as a black man. I mean, I just said, come on, you know, I just thought with Dwayne, I said, come on, it's 1968, man, nobody's going to care about that. And with Barbara, I fell into the old trap of the damsel in distress. You know, she breaks her shoes, she breaks her heels, she falls, she does everything, and she winds up being catatonic and ineffectual all the way through the movie. And it took me a while. It only, when people started to talk about the film, no one mentioned that. Nobody mentioned that, oh, this is not very nice to women. Everybody was just all about, you know, what a racial statement. No one ever mentioned it. But I noticed it. I said, wait, that was wrong. So when I did the remake, when I wrote the remake of Night of the Living Dead, the one that Tom Savini directed, I made her much strong. I made Barbara much stronger, and then I've sort of been apologizing ever since. And I think that Sarah is maybe the strongest. Maybe Asia in Land of the Dead, but she's also a bit of a victim. But she's pretty strong too in the end. Anyway, I've tried to apologize.
I think you have. I mean, in Day of the Dead, Sarah is like just as strong as like Sigourney Weaver's Ripley in Aliens. Like, it's a good, sharp character. But I mean, the interesting thing is, in these films, everyone they think that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's always either the wrong thing or that's not the only choice.
That's not the only choice. And that's it. Sarah in Day of the Dead is wrong about a lot of, you know, as much as she forgives Frankenstein, and, you know, and she's just wrong about it. She's too easy on the situation. She should have shot Rhodes, you know. So I was also trying to stick a little of that in there, that because Ben in Night of the Living Dead is wrong in the end. He was wrong. He was wrong about arguing. He was wrong about the basement. He's wrong. And in the end, he's proven wrong. But I was trying to do a little bit of that irony there with her, too.
And just to let you guys know, tomorrow, Saturday, we are doing a triple bill. We're going to be showing Night of the Living Dead, then Dawn of the Dead, and then Day of the Dead. And I'm sure those sighs are from people who aren't in Toronto. And also, actually, Day of the Dead.
Take it.
Day of the Dead, beautiful 35mm print, and it's actually uncut because when the film first came out in Ontario, the Ontario Film Review Board, our censors, cut the hell out of it. Yeah, you'll be able to see it in all its 35mm glory.
I never knew that. I just heard that from you the other evening.
Yeah, there's a scene in the film, and I remember when it came out on VHS, where there's this character who shoots himself and puts the gun to his mouth and pulls the trigger. But in the Ontario cut, you heard the gunshot, but then you just see him slump down to the wall, and there's something missing. And that's like a very integral part. It's not an integral part of the film, but it's a very elaborate special effect. It's not real. I mean, we could spin off on that.
Yeah.
I mean, when people say there's a great quote by, and I don't like to.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, the quote is, there's a quote from Godard, and I hate dropping this because it sounds really poncy and pretentious, but talking about film and talking about blood, Godard says, it's not blood, it's just the color red. And that's anytime you see someone screaming, getting squeamish and really upset, I'm like, no, that's not blood. It's just the color red. You're interpreting it as blood.
Right. Yeah.
So we've had someone who's been very patient here with a question.
Hi. I was just wondering,
your zombies, every movie, look a little bit different. They get scarier and more gorier. And I was just wondering, when you made Night of the Living Dead, if you kind of had that vision of what your zombies look like now in your more recent Dead films, or if it's that something that you build on every movie, you kind of give them a different look. And it's always interesting to see every movie they're going to look different, or it's creative.
Well, no, and actually when I made the first film, Night of the Living Dead, I didn't call them zombies. I didn't think of them as zombies. To me, zombies, I was doing dead people. And zombies, according to The Serpent and the Rainbow, and these guys that write about voodoo, they're not dead. They're given some sort of blowfish powder that makes them subservient and makes them slaves. They're not dead. And so I thought, I'm going to make the dead, for some reason, stop staying dead. And I thought I was doing a new creature. And I don't know, Carl Hardman and the people that did the makeup, because it was black and white, it was very forgiving. It was basically just pasty looking and sunken eyes and, really very simplistic. There were only a couple of makeups that were a little more elaborate. And that was it. And then all of a sudden, when people started to write about this film and started to call them zombies, I said, maybe they are zombies. And so I called them zombies in Dawn of the Dead. I finally used the word zombie. And what happened there, basically, was not much of an advance, because Tom Savini was in his early days of doing makeup special effects, and basically those zombies are just gray. I mean, if you look at them, there's nothing special about them. And it wasn't until Day of the Dead that Tom had come a long way with prosthetics and with being able to, do the effects work. And that was the first time that they sort of really advanced. And then after that, by the time we got to Land of the Dead, we had all the benefits of, everything, all the best prosthetic makeup and the best CG and everything else that we were able to use. And so you use what you can. And so that's really, it was almost an accidental process. We were growing up as the techniques were growing up.
And just to note about Your Undead don't eat brains. That's something which other people have run with. Before we did we had a discussion here the other night, and I heard someone in the audience go, brains. I'm like, that had nothing to do with this gentleman's work. Your zombies, your undead, don't eat brains.
My zombies have never eaten brains. They're this misconception. They could never crack it open. It's like a coconut. They could never crack the skull open. So.
I mean, where that came from, there's actually kind of a fun film, Return of the Living Dead, Dan O'Bannon's film, which is kind of looking at, it's like a postmodern fun take on the genre, and that's kind of where it came from. But I mean, the great thing is that your zombies, they all have personalities, and I mean, if you look at Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead, you've got one that's just enriched with a story and character, and is one of the main focal points.
One of the main characters in the movie, in both of those films, Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead. But I've always tried to give them character. Even in Dawn, when I first realized that they were zombies, I didn't want them to just be these sort of faceless. I wanted them to have a past. And so, there's a nun, there's a softball player, there's, I try even just with wardrobe to make them familiar, to that extent, familiar. And I think that's important. Instead, you look at the remake of Dawn and everybody's wearing running shoes and Nikes. And they're running. I don't get it. But
talk about that. slow zombies versus fast zombies.
Slow, for sure. If they're dead, they're slow.
So they run.
Automatic.
Yeah.
If they're dead, they're slow.
If they run, their ankles will break.
That's right. That's what I always say.
All right, we got time for two more questions. Let's see. We're following the beacon over here. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Romero. Okay, so I was born in '89, and I'm from Hong Kong, so zombies aren't actually a thing I grew up with on a regular basis, but I saw a few other horror movies, and the trope I actually grew up with was that in horror movies, no matter what the adversary, it's always either the black guy or the woman who dies first. And so when I watched Night of the Living Dead, that was actually what stuck out for me, was that you had a hero of color and that he got it.
He died last.
Yeah. So that was just an observation about how, that piece of work is obviously translating through time and over space. My question is, despite you receiving a lot of Midnight Madness zombie movies, and apparently most of them being terrible, can you comment on the fact that we still seem to be undergoing some kind of zombie renaissance in pop culture?
I don't get it. I honestly don't. First of all, I'm a little pissed off because I used to be the only guy. Now everybody's in my playground, I don't get the whole thing. I don't get the zombie walks. I don't get why 4,000 people come out and, Taya's a lovely person, but what is she, the Pied Piper? How does she get 4,000 people come out and put that goop on? And
this is our friend who runs the Toronto Zombie Walk, and every year it grows and grows, and then every cities are doing them all over. Yeah, but I mean,
unbelievable. We were in Strasbourg, France, and my wife Suze went out and all of a sudden encountered this zombie walk. I mean, she couldn't get across the street. It was like the marathon, the New York Marathon. You have to wait.
And there was a festival in Slovenia where you were able to judge the films, and you did it by phone. And they were and they were so excited. They were like, "Tell George we're doing the first zombie walk in Slovenia." I mean, is it because there's kind of an end of times hysteria, and is this people kind of like gripping onto?
Maybe somewhere way, way deep. I just think it's Halloween, man, and I don't think zombies have been supported in popular culture, popular fiction, by movies. Because if you think about it, what zombie movie has made more than $100 million? Zombieland is the only one, and they're not dead. So that's not the kind of numbers that usually interests Hollywood. Yeah, they're making a Zombieland too, but no movie has gone through the roof that way. It's video games. I think it's video games. There's millions of video games on our iPads. There are probably 75 zombie games on just on the iPad, and huge video from Resident Evil through. There's a House of the Dead. There's a million big best-selling zombie games.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of that is just kind of a different context for the shoot 'em up, for like a first-person POV. It's like, okay, well, we've done army games. Well, you can get away with shooting humans if they're zombies. Then it's just kind of another kind of conceit for that.
I think that's exactly right, and I think that's really what's kept the zombie so popular over the years. And I frankly, I don't understand. If you can talk about, well, the end of days, are people worried about the end of days? I'm just worried about the end of my days.
For me, the thing which always interested me in this particular genre, it wasn't so much the fact that it's the undead, that it's zombies. What scared me was always just the last man on earth scenario, where you wake up and life has changed, life is different, your loved ones are gone, whether it's zombies or anything else, just being the last man on earth. That's what I always find scary about these things, not the threat of flesh eaters.
Right, this might be the end for... Yeah, well, The Last Man on Earth is the name of Vincent Price, the Vincent Price version of I Am Legend. And I sort of loosely I Am Legend is loosely responsible for Night of the Living Dead.
I Am Legend, which is written by Richard Matheson, who is like a great horror kind of fantasy author. And so yeah, it was kind of inspired. Night of the Living Dead was kind of inspired from that in many.
Loosely, yeah. I mean, I wanted to do something about. I wanted to do the first day. Instead of I Am Legend is about the whole world has become, everyone in the world has become a vampire, and there's one guy left, and that's the last man on Earth. I wanted to do something about, well, how did that start? And go back to the first night, and that's the only sort of loose thread that was inspired by I Am Legend with Night. But
we've got time for probably one more question here. Okay, there's up there. Sorry, the people with the beacons, they're the ones who are picking there. So where is it? Or what? Wait, up. Yes, here, this gentleman here. Make it good.
A lot of pressure now. When you first came out, you said that when you saw the film, all you saw were the errors. And I'm wondering, in your process, when do you look at a piece of work or one of your films and say, I recognize there are a lot of errors, but it's time to share this?
That's a very good question, particularly for aspiring filmmakers. I can't watch a movie, I can't watch one of my movies. Once you've been through the whole process and you live with it, you live with every frame of it, and you're making frame by frame decisions, and boom, 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 and you finally put it to bed, you're never certain at that moment how it's going to play. And I try, except for events like these where I didn't come to watch the movie because I didn't want to see it again. I try not to watch films until at least 2 or 3 years later. Recently, there was a screening of Land of the Dead at Deluxe. They had editors, the Canadian
Editors Association of Canada
screening, and Susan and I went, and it's the first time I'd seen it. The first time either of us had seen it, almost since it was made, and it played okay. I mean, I wasn't disturbed by all of these problems. When I look at Night of the Living Dead, screen direction is off. First of all, I didn't know enough about screen direction. I didn't know that conversations were supposed to go that way. They're both looking the same way, and some of the stuff I just wasn't educated enough. Even though I'd watched films, basically all of Night of the Living Dead was basically stolen. All the shot selection was stolen. But more from Orson Welles. People say it's Hitchcockian, but I think it's more from Welles. Welles is Shakespeare films, Macbeth, Othello. The lighting, particularly. I was stealing from Orson Welles and trying to do my best that I could with it. And now, once I got away from it, once I started to learn about some of these basics, that's what I mean. All I can see now are the stupid little errors. There's a jump cut in it. There's, which I didn't realize. It looked like I could cut. It's the same shot, but there's a jump cut in it. And I cut a piece out of the middle, and it looked like they were in the same position, but they're not. And it's just stupid little things like that. And that's really it. But now, man, I've been over the last only maybe 5 years or so really comfortable with the process, and I can actually. I used to cover my ass by shooting single shots of everybody in the room, and so I could cut the script, edit the script any way I wanted. And now I'm happy and comfortable with sort of choreographing moments, and thankfully, because that's the best way to economize when you're on the set. it's also a good way to keep people from cutting shit out of your movie.
All right, on that note, let's hear it for George A. Romero.
Thank you. Thanks.